Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to Math for Week 2. We are moving on to a new lesson. It's going to be Lesson 18, and we're comparing fractions. So right now in this video, I'm going to help you to complete your pages in the math book, okay? So you should make sure you take a look at the family letter. That's on page 377. And you're also going to be looking at Mrs. Alder's slides that she posted. Remember, I put the link in the checklist. So when you look at the checklist, you can go to Monday Math. That's going to bring you to Mrs. Alder's page, and you're going to be able to go through her slides, okay? It's important you do that to get a little bit more familiar with the new lesson, okay? Then, right now, together we're going to do pages 381 and 382. Okay? Before we jump right into the pages, I'm just going to review a few things that the family letter told a little about, okay? So, first of all, the target or our goal for doing this lesson is so that hopefully we will be able to compare two fractions with different numerators and denominators. So remember, numerator on the top, denominator on the bottom. Record the results with symbols like greater than, equal to, or less than. And provide evidence such as visual models of fractions. So we're going to be drawing some fractions, okay? So I just want to review some important terms that you're going to be working with. One of them is going to be compare. You are going to be deciding if numbers, amounts, or sizes are greater than, less than, or equal to each other. So this type of comparing we're going to be doing is where we're thinking about what is more, what is less, what is the same, okay? So in those symbols, this is how we do them. So this is the greater than symbol. Remember, like the old-fashioned alligator, the greater than symbol is going to eat the bigger number, okay? Then you have equal to, and then you have less than, okay? So let's take a look at some of these examples, and we're going to use a symbol to compare the fractions, okay? So here, we're comparing 3/4 because I can see that I have 4 equal parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 of them are shaded, right? And then we're comparing 2/6 because I have 6 equal parts, 2 of them are shaded. So we are going to do this visually by looking at the fractions and determining which one is greater than or less than. So when I look, I notice 3/4 is shaded more than 2/6, right? This amount of 2/6 looks smaller than 3/4. I think I definitely know that for sure, and it's pretty safe to say I can compare those. So since 3/4 is greater, my greater than sign is going to be eating that big number because he's so hungry, right? So if I were to read this comparison, I would say 3/4 is greater than 2/6, okay? Now, I show them in a different way here. I compared them on a number line, okay? Let me see just a little bit closer. So, I showed you on this number line 1/3, right? My number line is broken up into 1, 2, 3 chunks, and this bar is just going up to 1/3. On this number line, it's broken up into 8 equal parts. My bar is going up to 5/8, okay? So I'm going to visually look, and also I have some numbers on this number line that are pretty clearly showing me 5/8 is clearly going further down the number line than 1/3, right? It's safe to say that 5/8 is greater than 1/3. So now I have to see how I'm going to put this in my comparison because it starts with 1/3. And 1/3 is less than 5/8. Okay, we're using our less than sign, and the alligator's mouth is eating the bigger value. Okay, So that's some basic stuff about comparing. Then we're also going to take a big look at common denominators, okay? Common denominators are something you're going to be using for a really long time, lots and lots in 5th grade. So the definition of a common denominator is a number that is a common multiple of the denominators of 2 or more fractions. So I'm going to explain to you what that means. Sometimes you cannot compare fractions if we're not provided a model like this and we can see. We can only compare fractions that have the same denominator or a common denominator. Because, for example, how would we know right off the top of our head if 5/3 is greater than, less than, or equal to 1/2? We can't compare these fractions, boys and girls, because the denominators are different. So we have to find a common denominator. When I find one of those, I ask myself this question. I say, what is a number that both denominators can go into? So, my denominators are 5 and 2. I'm wondering, what can 5 and 2 both go into evenly? I can look at my multiplication chart, and I could go down my 2 and look at these numbers here. And then I'm going to go down my 5 and take a look at this. Oh, I notice down my 5 column, there's 10, and down my 2 column, there's a 10. Hope you guys see that. So that means that 10 could be my common denominator. I like to put CD for common denominator, and then I always put 10. I always put that so I don't forget what my common denominator is. So now, I have to make equivalent fractions, just like we did in the lesson last week. So I'm going to do this by doing something like this. I'm going to rewrite my fraction. So I have 3/5, and I'm going to multiply it by something that's going to give me my common denominator of 10. Do you see how I set that up? So I want the denominator to be 10 so that I can compare these fractions. So I'm wondering, what can I multiply 5 by to get 10? So 5, 10, 5 times 2 is 10. So I'm going to have a 2 down here in my denominator. Whatever I have in my denominator, when I'm making equivalent fractions, I have to have in my numerator. So that's going to go on the top as well. Then I multiply across. 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, now this fraction has my common denominator. I want you to know that this 6/10 is equivalent or equal to 5/3. Okay, so we did not change the amount that is represented, we just changed the common denominator. Okay, so now we did this one, we need to do this one. So we have 1/2 times something that equals something with a denominator of 10. So we do 2 times what equals 10? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2 times 5 equals 10. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. Then I multiply across the top. 1 times 5 is 5. So that means that 5/3 is equivalent to 6/10. 1/2 is equivalent to 5/10. Now do you see how I can compare these? They're both showing tenths. They have 10 equal parts. In this one, 6 are shaded. In this one, 5 are shaded. So which one is greater? This one is greater, which means 3/5 is greater than 1/2. Okay? It's going to get easier, okay? It's a little confusing at first, but you'll get it. Now, for this other one, I'm just going to show another example. I'm going to lower here. All right, so we have 5/8 and 3/4. So I need to figure out what is my common denominator for this one. I'm going to write my CD equals. So I'm asking myself, which number can both 8 and 4 go into evenly? So if I don't know, I could use my multiplication chart, and I could go down my 4 and down my 8. Oh, both 4 and 8 can go into 8, right? So my common denominator is 8. Now, this fraction already has my common denominator, so I don't have to change it, okay? I'm just going to leave it. But this one, I need to get my common denominator. So my original fraction is 3/4, and I'm going to multiply it by something that equals something with a denominator of 10, because that's my common denominator. This is supposed to be 8. I was mixing up from the last one. With a denominator of 8. That's my common denominator. So 4 times what equals 8? 4 times 2 equals 8. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, so that means that 3/4 is equivalent to 6/8. Now I can compare because my denominators are the same, okay? What is greater, 5/8 or 6/8? Well, 6/8 would be greater, right? So that means 3/4 is greater than 5/8. So my greater than sign, my sign is going to be eating the bigger number, okay? So if I were to read this comparison, I would say 5/8 is less than 3/4, okay? So let's move on to page 181. I'll move over my pen. Okay. So open up to page 181, and we're actually only going to do number 2. Okay. So here we go. It says for number 2, I just blew it up, okay? It's on the bottom of page 181. I'm confusing you guys. It's on the bottom of 381, okay? If you're not on page 381, pause me and get there. And then we're going to look at number 2. So the problem says, compare 2/3 and 2/5. Rewrite the fractions so they have a common denominator. Use the signs to compare. Okay, so I have 2/3 and 2/5. I know I cannot compare those right away because they have 2 different denominators. So I'm going to need to find a common denominator. They started these steps for me. They rewrote 2/3, and they're saying it's multiplied by a fraction that gives a numerator of 10. So we're treating this like a puzzle. We can say 2 times what is 10? 2 times 5 is 10. When I'm finding equivalent fractions, whatever I multiply the top by, I must do to the bottom. So now I'm going to multiply 3 times 5 equals 15. Okay, 1 down. So that tells me my common denominator is 15, right? Because that's the equivalent fraction I just found. So that means we're saying 3 and 5 can both go into 15, which is true. For this one, they already put the common denominator here. We have to say 5 times what is 15? 5 times 3 is 15. I do the same to the top. 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so now I have my equivalent fractions. 2/3 is equivalent to 10/15. I put that in here. And 2/5 is equivalent to 6/15. When we compare these, now that they both have 15 as the common denominator, I can look at it and compare. So I have 10/15 and 6/15. Well, 10 is greater. So the sign is going to be open to the 10/15. So if I read this, it would say 10/15 is greater than 6/15. So that means 2/3 is greater than 2/5. Okay? All right. Pause me if you need a minute. Otherwise, we're moving on to page 382. So, this is saying, Donato and Aman have bottles of juice that are the same size. Donato drinks 3/4 of his juice. Aman drinks 3/6 of his juice. Which boy drinks more juice? Okay. So, we can solve this problem in a few different ways, right? Let's first find the common denominator and solve it mathematically, okay? So I'm going to set it up like 3/4 is going to be what to 3/6, okay? So I need to figure out what number can 4 and 6 go into. Can use my chart. I'm going to go down the 4. Okay. And down the 6. Oh, there's a 12 here, and there's a 12 there. So that means that 4 and 6 can both go into 12. So I always like to write this. CD is 12. Okay. Now, I need to find my equivalent fractions with the common denominator of 12. So I'm going to rewrite them. You guys will write it under here. I'm just going to write it on the board so it's big enough to see, okay? So I'm going to rewrite my fractions. So let's pretend we already wrote this. I don't want you to get confused. We wrote this already. And now we're going to come underneath and we're going to rewrite our fractions 3/4 and 3/6. So I'm asking myself, 3/4 times what equals something that's going to give me the common denominator of 12. So 4 times what equals 12? 4 times 3 equals 12. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. So now 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so that means that 3/4 is equivalent to 9/12. How about 3/6? So 3/6 times what equals something with a denominator of 12? 6 times what equals 12? 6 times 2 is 12. Do the same to the top. 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, so that means 3/6 is equivalent to 6/12. Now I can compare boys and girls because I have two fractions that have the same denominator or common denominator, okay? So I know 9 is greater than 6, so that means 9/12 is greater than 6/12. So 3/4 is greater than 3/6. Okay? So on your paper, you would put this work right here. I just want to be able to see it. Okay, then it says check your answer. We're going to try and check it using a different way. We're going to make a picture. So, I want you to make, you're going to be down here now at number 4. We're checking our work by using another strategy. So, let's draw a bar, 2 bars, about the same size, as best we can. Okay, and we're going to show 3/4 in 1. So to show fourths, I need to split this shape up into 4 equal parts. This is how I like to do fourths. When you cut 4 in half, it's 2. So I can cut it in half first, and then I cut my halves in half, okay? And I need to show 3/4. That's gonna be my 3/4. Okie doke. Let's show 3/6. So when I make 6, when I cut 6 in half, it's 3. So I'm going to cut it in half, and then I break these into 3 parts. So I just do a line and a line, which gives me 3. a line, and a line. It gives me 3 more. Now I have 6. I want to do 3/6. 1, 2, 3. Okay. In our model, we can also see 3/4 is greater than 3/6. So we're just going to write it again underneath. 3/4 is greater than 3/6. And that's going to be your answer for number 4. Okay, boys and girls, take a look at the checklist. Make sure you get the rest of your math stuff done. And let me know if you have any questions.